I can put a spaceman in the ring versus a zombie or some time traveling mutant warrior. You know, we can do that in pro wrestling.
You are also an actor. How did you get into acting?
I got into acting from wrestling. It was just a natural progression. My idol in pro wrestling was Pat Roach, because Pat Roach was a very good British world of sport wrestler. He just had a presence about him. But what really made him stand out to me was he was the guy in Indiana Jones who got his head cut off by a propeller in the first one, you know, when he's having that fight with Harrison Ford. And that awoke to me the idea of being a stunt fighter or an actor, because, you know, there's this wrestler on screen doing it with Indiana Jones. And to me, it didn't get no bigger than that at the time. And the more I started learning about British wrestling, the more I kind of got into Pat Roach, and the more I learned about the different films he did, about James Bond and The Temple of Doom and Alvida Sempet and all these different things, that I wanted to be from then on the modern day Pat Roach. That was it. It'd always been a vision of mine to move into the acting role, and especially with people like The Rock, you know, again, another idol of mine. I don't understand why wrestlers don't want to get into the acting industry after they wrestle, or whilst they wrestle, because the two help each other along the way. I don't understand it. I think every single wrestler should be learning to act and should be learning to do stunts and screen fighting, which is what I try to do. It's what I train. I train wrestlers to do this. So I wouldn't even say it's a side income. They have to learn this now as part of their pro wrestling training. You look at Batista, you look at John Cena, you look at The Rock, three of the biggest paid actors in Hollywood. Pretty sure pro wrestling helped them in some way get to where they are now. So why would you not learn to be, why would you not even learn to be a pro wrestler as an actor if it's going to open doors for you like that? It's a skill it's so beneficial to learn, because even for stunt work, pro wrestling is going to teach you about hitting your mark, your angles, setting stuff up. So much what you learn in terms of stunts, you'll learn on the pro wrestling training. It should be on a stunt register, in my opinion, to learn to be a pro wrestler. But anyway, I just the first job I ever got was my good mate Ross Boyas. I contacted him and I told him I'm a pro wrestler, I want to get into this and that. And I knew I'd stand out a little bit because I had tattoos, and it's been my trademark with my tattoos. And at the time I had my arm tattooed. I mean, he said, I've got a role for you. And it was in 10 Dead Men, and it was with Brendan, and I had a fight scene with him, and he stabbed me in the neck and he shot me in the back. And it's the first time I met Jude Poyer, and I said to Jude, you know, if I really want to get into the industry as a stuntman or a filmmaker, or any advice you got. He looked at me and he said, have you got a camera? I said, yep. He said, pick a camera up and start filming. That's all he had to say to me. Next thing you know, I took it on board and I started making my own films, and from that, London Rampage was born. But yeah, the first film with Ross, and then Ross kind of gave me my love for action movies from then on, because he was so passionate about action movies and just random action movies that one I'd never heard of before, but after meeting Ross, I knew I needed to watch him. He made me that passionate about the industry. I wanted to watch these movies, so I did. I started researching films and action movies in particular. So I do a lot of stuff for Ross when he's got if he's got roles available for me, I audition for him and such. The power of Facebook, I guess. They saw me on Facebook and they heard about my reputation and kind of like got me roles. I had an agent as well. But it's weird because you can have an agent now. Agents are cool, they're good, and I've got a lot of work from agents. Social media now as well, because a lot of the work I get on big films it's direct from IMDb. People contact me on IMDb or through Facebook or Instagram, and they're big legit films as well. So my social media helped me a lot to kind of get into roles. But I trained as an actor in 2007 anyway. I started training at the Actors Centre in Covent Garden, because another thing about stunt fighters and actors, or let's say people that want to get into action movies from a pro wrestling background or a stunt background, they have to understand you need to take this as professionally as you did your martial art background or your stunt background. Go and learn to act. Take some acting lessons. It's vital. You can't just expect to walk into something and you know, just either be the best. Learn your trade, study your trade. I started at Actors Centre in 2007. I was there for 3 years. And again, I'm still learning. I think you get better each time you do a film with someone. Like, it's the same with wrestling. You're only as good as the person you're in the ring with. That is so true. But also you learn from people who are better than you. And I'm always learning from people I'm acting with and taking advice from them. And it's kind of like I approach everything as I did my pro wrestling. If someone tells me this is something, I always go, well, I learned that in pro wrestling, but we called it this. And I think that was easier for me to kind of understand acting techniques or stunt fighting techniques, because we did the same in pro wrestling. We just called it something different.
Can you tell us about the relationship between acting and wrestling and how they can work together?
There was techniques that we learned in acting where about, it's called kinesthetic response. And I said, well, in wrestling, we have kinesthetic response, but we call it working the crowd, or we call it, like working. And then you start to understand that a lot of the techniques in acting are the same as pro wrestling, but they're called something different. It's because they're the same art form. And I think that's a lot. The same can go with comedy. Comedy and wrestling are very similar. DJing, comedy and wrestling are similar, but they're three totally different art forms. But the thing is, they all are true to a certain beat that needs to follow each other. Once you understand that beat, it's very easy to kind of go, okay, I understand this energy. What I'm learning is an energy, and I'm going to take that energy into pro wrestling. I'm going to take that energy into being an actor. I'm going to take that energy into being a comedian, dancer, a stage performer, a stuntman. I think once I started breaking it down like that, understanding acting was a lot easier. Understanding filmmaking was a lot easier. Understanding stunt work was a lot easier. The thing with pro wrestling, what we tend to do is we tend to overact, make things bigger, but that's for a reason, because, pro wrestling is very much a live performance art form, whereas filmmaking is not. It's not live. So camera is brung in, you're working towards this, so things are smaller, but the footing's slightly different, but the energy is still the same. So, but again, I really think every stuntman should learn to be a pro wrestler. Your art form of stunts is going to improve tenfold. And also learn to be pro wrestling to bring out your confidence when you're acting. I think if you talk to The Rock, he'd say the same thing, and Batista. It's basically, to sum up in an answer, pro wrestling and acting is kind of like the same. It's the same energy. It just depends on what art form you want to take it to.
What do you see as the future of wrestling?
Personally, with COVID as it is, I wouldn't say if COVID is what it is, actually. Let's just say the future of wrestling as it is. It's gone too far down the road of being a serious art, like a shoot style, we call it, UFC, MMA route, where people want to see people really kicking the shit out of each other and kind of people wearing very boring ring gear, black pants and nothing else, I think wrestling will go, and it should go back to being how it was in the early 90s in terms of its aesthetics, but in its performance, keeping an element of the performance, but still remembering we can create this whole world of magic. We don't have to make it look real, because if people want real, they can go watch UFC, which is what UFC is for. We're the other end of what the UFC can offer. We can make things larger. I can put a spaceman in the ring versus a zombie or some time traveling mutant warrior. We can do that in pro wrestling. We're not limited to that, and I think too many wrestlers are scared to push the boundaries of that. But we should be opening this up to as an option, as a side option of what pro wrestling can be, which is fun, fantasy, illusion, larger than life characters, because wrestling has really lost its larger than life characters. There are no more Rocks in the industry, no more. No one wants to be the Rock, which is such a shame. I think wrestling is going to go down the route as staged combat shows that are immersive theatre performances, as you saw with Ed Gamester's show, where he did Ragnarok. That's the route wrestling's going to go down, should go down, offering a kind of, he basically did like a Norse mythology show for people that haven't seen, but using the art form of wrestling to explain the story. So I think wrestling is going to go down that route. You look at what kids have to compete with today. You go into Tesco's, you go into Sainsbury's, right? You go to the toy section. There's 1,000 toys. You're competing with shelf space constantly. Yep. You've got a banana holding a bazooka, wearing sunglasses and Bermuda shorts. Yep. You have a guy with a burger head, combat military gear, a parachute, holding an AK-47. You've got all these mental Fortnite action figures that even I look and go, that's amazing. I would have loved that as a kid. I don't even know what that is, but I want that banana holding a machine gun, wearing glasses, Bermuda shorts, because I think it's incredible. Then you look at what pro wrestling has to offer. It's a naked man in pants. You know, that's it. How is that going to appeal to a kid? And it's bland. It looks bland. It appears bland. It's just bland. There's no colour, there's no energy, there's no fantasy in pro wrestling, in my opinion. Why can't I put a banana wearing sunglasses, Bermuda shorts in a wrestling ring, fighting a guy with a hamburger head? We can do that in pro wrestling. I think we've forgotten that's what we can do. We've gone down the route of this, try and trick everyone and make them think it's real. People know it's a performance art, so let's give them the performance art.
Do you have any upcoming projects that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I'm just working on my own. I'm just putting the finishing touches on my own film at the minute. It's took me 2 years to edit the thing because of the I want to say COVID, but not really. I guess COVID's got in the way, but it didn't, affect it. But I kind of made a film with a lot of my students, and because I trained them up to do stunts. It's a follow-up from London. It's not a sequel to London Rampage, but it's a film where I learned from all the mistakes I made from London Rampage and kind of went, well, let's not do that again. Let's make this better. Let's do that. And just have fun making another film like I did with London Rampage. It was a great learning project for me, just to learn how to make a film as well. I decided to do another one, and that should be out this year. It's almost done. We've secured distribution. It's got a lot of famous wrestlers in it, a lot of my students as well, and it's also got a lot of famous actors in it that I'm sure Fighting Spirit is going to be very familiar with, but I don't want to say too much yet. But I really think it's going to show the world exactly what Burridge fight design is about, and the energy we go with, and show the world this is what pro wrestling can bring to the table. This is why we're different. This is why we are a unique stunt fighter. We want a unique actor, and we can offer this package together in one bundle, and hopefully show the world as well my skills as a fight choreographer and director, because this is the second film I've done now as a director.
And time for speed round. So you pick one film for each category.
Okay.
What is your favourite film from your childhood?
Bloodsport.
What was the last film you watched?
Jaws. I watched it last night.
What is the next film you're going to watch?
Great film.
Which cinematic universe would you like to live in, e.g. the Grand Budapest Hotel, X-Men, MCU, Lord of the Rings?
That's a good question. Blade Runner.
And that is the end of Speed Round. Thank you so much for the interview.